Hey everybody, it's birdie time. Welcome back to the channel. Today I'll be giving my thoughts on the new Streamline Shift. MVP has said that they designed the Shift to be a way to give back to the community, and they're doing this in two ways. First of all, 60% of the sales generated for MVP by selling the Shift, they will be giving to St. Jude's Children's Hospital. In fact, the stamp itself is based off of an art design by a child who is treated at St. Jude's, which I think is pretty cool. And the other way that MVP designed the Shift to be for the community is that the flight numbers are 95, -31. Their intent is for the Shift to be useful for every disc golfer. After trying it out for myself, I think that the Shift might indeed be one of the best drivers for the vast majority of disc golfers. For my review footage today, I used this Proton Shift, which weighs 172 grams. As always, I like to give you a frame of reference for how I play disc golf so that you can tell if the Shift might fly well for you. I'm currently rated 957. My max distance is just a touch over 400 feet. I tend to throw with just a slight bit of hyzer, and I pretty much fan grip everything. We'll take an up close and personal look at the Shift in just a few minutes, but for now, let's see how it flies. The understability of the Shift makes it pretty easy to get big distance off the tee. For me, throwing full power made it a little bit tough to control the full flight and actually get that maximum distance, but I managed to push it to around 360 feet a couple of times. Taking off a little bit of that max power, I was able to get the Shift over 330 feet pretty often with turnover shots. For the purposes of this review, I did throw the Shift with quite a bit of power to fully test the limits of the disc. That being said, the Shift is very flippy. I only had one throw with it that didn't actually turn over. Only once did I throw it pretty much straight, and I think there was a tailwind, and it was definitely a lower powered shot. But otherwise, every time I threw the Shift, it flipped up and drifted right. Maybe a lot, maybe a little, but it turned over every single time. I only threw a couple of gentle shots with the Shift, so there's every chance that it really flies a little bit differently for you than it does for me. But even so, if you end up getting the Shift, please let me know how it flies. I'd love to hear about it in the comments. Because of the understability, I really didn't throw the Shift flat very often. When I did, surprise, surprise, it went right really fast. But if I really wanted to get some flight out of the Shift, I had to throw it with some hyzer. Flat shots just didn't get much distance because they tucked into the ground too quickly. When throwing with much power, that hyzer was absolutely essential to actually get anywhere close to maximum flight. Even with a fair amount of hyzer, I really turned the Shift over almost every single time. Only once did I throw with enough hyzer and control to flip up the Shift to flat with ever just a touch of drift to the right before coming back and fading. Otherwise, every time I threw it, I flipped over and went right. When throwing with enough height, I was able to throw with some hyzer and flip up into a big turnover, some full flight sweeping shots that topped out over 350. The Shift can be really good for those massive lines, but it's also flippy enough that it might be tough to do that consistently without burning your disc over into the ground too soon. With the right amount of hyzer, I was able to flip the Shift up and over through a gap and moving right to get some big distance, kind of helping substitute for weak or inconsistent forehand, kind of like what I have. After just a handful of throws with the Shift, I figured that I knew it was going to happen if I threw it on anhyzer. And as it turns out, I was completely right. This thing dives to the right. With a little bit of anhyzer, this thing is so impatient to get to the ground. If you're looking for a roller disc and you have some good power, then the Shift might actually be a really good choice for you. I tend not to throw rollers very often, but I was able to get the Shift out to about 370 with a roller, and I know it could roll well past 400 for somebody who's experienced with the rollers and hits it at that right angle. Or maybe not a right angle, because that would be vertical and then it would curl too quickly. But anyway, if you're looking to throw the Shift on anhyzer in the air, you're probably going to have to throw it pretty high. As far as throwing in the wind is concerned, my advice, don't. This thing is pretty unpredictable and uncontrollable in high winds. I would say a tailwind might actually be the ideal situation to get a massive distance shot with it, but otherwise, it's going to be rough out there. With such minimal fade, you're probably not going to get much ground play out of the shift. Only a handful of times did I actually throw the shift for a long enough flight for it actually to stop turning and come back in a fade near the end of it. And when it did, it really didn't get a whole lot of ground play. Other than landing at a roller angle, the shift is probably going to hit the ground and stay pretty close to where it lands. I think that if you have a pretty high arm speed, then a roller is probably the ideal throw for the shift. It's so flippy that it's going to be tough for you to control and consistently have a huge turnover shot with it. But if you're looking to lay it down into a fast roller, it's probably a perfect pick. But for lower arm speeds, I think that the understability of the shift is a huge selling point. This might be the perfect disc for you to get some big distance throws with minimal effort. You can get a flip-up line, maybe even a turnover shot with very minimal power, and get good distance off the tee without having to exert yourself too much. The shift could be a max distance bomber disc for you, or maybe it's just a forehand replacement to hit a line and push right where other discs would start to fade. If you're thinking you might want to try out the shift for yourself, I recommend Fox Flyers Disc Golf. Not only did they give me this shift ahead of time so that I could put this review together, but they also have a discount code. Anybody who uses the discount code bhirdie will get free shipping on orders over $25. So if you want to get your hands on the shift and maybe you haven't grabbed a trail yet, that'd be a perfect combo for stable, flippy drivers to get in your bag. I'm a long way from having my own merch, so if you're looking for a little way to support me, then buying something from Fox Flyers and using my code is a great way to show that support. My common miss with the shift was not giving it enough hyzer and burning it over way too quickly. I had several shots that ended up well over 100 feet short of my target just because I didn't give it enough hyzer. I also had several shots quickly flip over and go straight OB. My worst throw, though, was probably on 15, where I tried to throw a massive ripped turnover shot. I didn't give it nearly enough hyzer, and I terrorized some poor birds that I hadn't even seen because they were so far away from my aiming point. And of course, I had to walk through an ankle-deep puddle to get my disc back. I'm still drying my shoes. Just to test every aspect of the shift, I tried it out on the putting green. As it turns out, I don't really recommend it. I actually putted pretty poorly from up close with the shift. I almost rang up a 70-plus foot putt.
Oh, so close.
But I had to content myself with a 60-footer.
Yes! Woo!
So maybe if you struggle with long putts, the shift is a really bad solution. Now that we've seen how the shift flies, let's take a look up close. It seems like the shift is only available in the Proton Plastic at the moment. I did see that there was a space for the Neutron Plastic in different stores online, but I didn't see it available for pre-order in the Neutron, only the Proton. So I might be wrong about that, but it looks like this is all we have for the moment. The Proton Plastic is a durable premium plastic and is intended to be able to keep the flight path of the disc over the long term. As with most premium plastics, the Proton did get pretty slippery when wet. And of course, I was out on a soggy day getting this review footage, so I was constantly having to dry it off in order to have a good grip on it. For me, the Proton Plastic has a nice grip to it when it is dry, but when you go to throw it, it still has that smooth release. As mentioned before, the flight numbers of the shift are 9, 5, -3, 1, and shares those flight numbers notably with the MVP Impulse, the Innova Sidewinder, and the Discmania TDX. So if you've thrown any of those three discs before, then you might have a good idea of what the shift can do. The shift is 21.2 centimeters in diameter, it's 1.5 centimeters tall, has a 1.1 centimeter rim depth, and a 2.1 centimeter rim width. With all of those specific measurements, the exact size is shared with the Infinite Aztec and the Millennium ES1. As we look a little bit more closely into the specific measurements of the shift, I'll be comparing it to 875 more common discs from the major manufacturers. 208 of those discs are going to be control drivers, just like the shift. At 21.2 centimeters, the shift is pretty close to that minimal 21 centimeters in diameter. Roughly a third of discs are 21 or 21.1 centimeters across, about a third of the discs share that 21.2 centimeters that the shift has, and then roughly a third of discs are wider than that. But that ranges all the way to 23.7. So there's a much greater range of width wider than the shift than there is narrower. But at the same time, most discs are within 0.2 of a centimeter of that 21.2 in diameter. When comparing the shift to other control drivers, we see a very similar story. 39% of those control drivers are 21.2 centimeters across, about 33% are less, and about 28% are more in diameter than that 21.2. Compared to other discs in general, 1.5 centimeters of height is on the short side. Only 8% of discs share that 1.5, with 5% of discs coming in at 1.4 or 1.3 centimeters of height. So that means 87% of discs are taller than the shift. He's so short. Looking at other control drivers, we see a pretty similar story. 15% share that height of 1.5, 9% are shorter, making 76% of control drivers taller than the shift. The rim depth of the shift is 1.1 centimeters, which is as shallow as rim depths go. Roughly 28% of discs share that 1.1, meaning about 72% of discs have a deeper depth than 1.1 centimeters. Looking at other control drivers, pretty much half of them are 1.1 centimeters, and the other half are 1.2. Then 7 of them are 1.3, and then the Archangel is 1.4. And yeah, that math totally adds up. The rim width is 2.1 centimeters. Only 4% of discs share this measurement, with 22% of them being wider, ranging up to 2.5 centimeters, and 74% being thinner, ranging all the way down to 0.6 centimeters of rim width. This really isn't too much of a surprise. With a control driver, you're going to have a decently wide rim, but distance drivers are going to be wider, so not a shock. What did surprise me though was finding out that only 3 out of 208 control drivers share that 2.1 centimeter measurement, and only 1 control driver is wider at 2.2. This means that 96% of control drivers have a thinner rim width ranging down to 1.6 centimeters. I think this means that while the shift is a control driver, it has a higher speed and distance potential than most control drivers. That's my take anyway. So I love me a good turnover shot, but even with the Soul, Beat and Dynasty, and my lightweight D2 Air, I think the shift is just a little bit too flippy for my bag. I think that my arm speed is just a little bit too high to really utilize the shift for air shots. If I get a little bit better at rollers, the shift might be like the first disc that I go to slot it in the bag and use to lay down some rollers. For what it's worth, this Sidewinder was my first driver. Now it's covered in MPO signatures and I don't throw it anymore. But when I started out as a complete noob, I was throwing the Sidewinder and it was hyzering on me. Then as I got a little bit better, it was a great straight shot, maybe a little bit of drift to the right, and eventually it turned into a huge turnover disc, and then in the end, it was just a roller disc. I can see the shift being for newer disc golfers what the Sidewinder was for me when I was starting out. So for newer players, I really don't recommend throwing drivers, but if you are going to be throwing a driver, then the Sidewinder would have been one of the first that I would have gone to recommend. So the shift really fills that slot really well. I think for low arm speeds, it's a great turnover disc. It has a lot of potential for easier distance without having that maximum arm speed. And even if you're not throwing other more stable control drivers, having that understability kind of makes the shift usable, I would say, for almost anybody. So looking at the flight numbers of 9.5, -3.1, I think they're pretty much spot on. The disc definitely has a good bit of glide to it, and of course it's very flippy. That -3 is very accurate. If you throw it with a little bit of power, it's going to move right. I think that one fade is right as well. Eventually in the flight path, if it's long enough, it's going to kick in. It's going to start to slow down and go left. But overall, you're going to overcome it out of your hand with that little bit of power. Thanks for watching my review of the new Streamline Shift. I hope it was helpful, and if you're thinking of getting your hands on one for yourself, then I recommend foxflyersdiscgolf.com. Don't forget my promo code bhirdie. So let me know, are you thinking of buying the shift? Do you already have one? Are you afraid that it would be too flippy for you? Let me know your thoughts in the comments, and if you've thrown it, tell me what it did for you. I'd love to know how it flew for you. Thanks again for watching. Catch you guys on the next one.